So I'm chatting to Tom Van Laar about his project from the University of Sydney, who is working on an Energy Consumers Australia grant-funded project around empowering cold consumers, that's culturally and linguistically diverse consumers. And why don't you just share with us first, Tom, why did you choose cold consumers as the focus of this project?
Well, Phil, look, there's been quite a bit of attention for creating more responsible use of energy in Australia and getting people to really understand what that means and why it is important. And there's been research done in elderly consumers, in low income consumers. But the fact of the matter is, there are 7 million Australians that don't only speak English at home. That's about 27% of the population. There are 8.5 million Australians that were born overseas. That's literally a third of the country. So ignoring that huge group and all those communities, that's just irresponsible. So it's about time that we do some research into how do cold consumers, how can they be empowered to actually pursue kind of a responsible energy consumption.
And before you even start looking at cold consumers and trying to understand what their needs are and how the narrative is going to influence the way they use energy, you do have to look at the overarching landscape of all consumers in Australia. So to start this work, you first had to uncover how energy policy program narratives construct an ideal Australian energy consumer. What did you learn from stage one of the project?
Yeah, that's a good point. So in stage one, we really collected all the policy narratives that are out there. We analyzed them using a discourse analysis, which is like a really in-depth reading. And what we discovered is that subconsciously, the authors of these documents, so a lot of policymakers, they have in their heads something of what we call a hero's journey. So a hero's journey is a template. It's a template that we've seen, across different cultures, across different times, like in history. It is basically the idea that a hero travels through three stages. There's an ordinary world, and then the hero leaves that ordinary world to start a journey. Now, that journey, there are a lot of trials and trepidations. There's also a metaphorical death, a rebirth, and a return. Now, this template we've seen work in cinema. Think of movies like The Lord of the Rings, in literature, in popular culture. What we saw when we analyzed these policy documents is that even in the energy market, in those documents, a certain hero's journey is sketched in a way of how consumers should consume energy.
So this narrative that you talk about, that all Australian energy consumers are potentially expected to kind of attain or aspire to, is a really important part of the work, where you then launch onto the next stage, which is understanding where cold consumers fit into these narratives, or where they might fit with different policies and communication campaigns in the future. How does the establishment of the hero's journey lead through to the next stages, and how will those learnings help to empower cold consumers with the policy and program recommendations?
Yeah, so like I was saying, right, when you have a hero's journey, people leave that known world, right? So we're all asked to, become more responsible, right? To actually become more aware of our energy use. That's not as easy for everyone. It might be hard for some. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what the hero's journey is about. It says, look, at some point, there's going to be that really hard moment, that metaphorical belly of the whale, right? That's the moment where people really struggle. And the idea of the hero's journey is that you overcome that struggle and actually then, change for the better. But overcoming that struggle because of structural difficulties might actually be completely impossible for a lot of cold consumers. So what we're trying to do in stage two of the project is actually we are currently doing that. We're speaking with cold consumers about how they perceive that journey, and are they even able to continue through that difficult part to become those heroes that can change their energy consumption for the better.
Well, sounds great. And instead of kind of now trying to jump to kind of ideas or conclusions about what some of those things might be, maybe just talk about what you hope the impact of the work when it's completed, recognizing that stages 2 and 3 haven't been completed yet, but what do you hope the overall impact will be for CALD consumers in Australia?
So what we're really hoping to do in the end is come up with a toolbox, especially for policymakers, to have a broader and more diverse idea of who consumers are of energy in Australia, so that they can actually adapt that hero's journey that they're talking about in their documents, so that CALD consumers can also participate fully in the energy market.
Maybe just quickly tell us, to sum up, where's a good place to find more information about this project? It is in progress, but in terms of the early stage work, is there the best place to find that information and those reports?
Yeah, so the Energy Consumers Australia Grants Archive has the discourse analysis that I just described, right? This first stage, that's available there. And eventually there will be a full report and a documentary available as well.
No, it sounds great. Well, thanks heaps for joining us. Maybe I'll head out my own hero's journey, Frodo Baggins style, or Indiana Jones, or however you mention it. But hopefully, it has a really great outcome. So thanks again for joining us.
You're most welcome. Cheers.